everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about Star Wars. Now, I'm sorry to say I have not yet seen The Rise of Skywalker. I don't know if I'm going to be posting a review about it at all, considering that there are tons of reviews about it already. It's only been about a day and a half or so since the recording of this video, since it's been out. So I may or may not do it. I'm not 1,000% sure yet. We'll see down the line. But today I still want to talk about Star Wars. I've been in full Star Wars mode leading up to The Rise of Skywalker, whether it be watching the movies or maybe like The Mandalorian or a couple of other things, just getting hyped for more Star Wars. So it got me thinking, and I've had a couple of discussions over the past few weeks, even leading up to the big release, about how to get someone into Star Wars. I've had a couple of people ask me, as well as just sort of ask the general public that I've noticed over the past few years as well, as to how to get someone into Star Wars. Now, of course, there are tons of different ways to do it. This is not the end-all, be-all type of video where I'm going to say this is the definitive way to do it. Whether you do it this way or not is wrong type of thing. This is just my mere opinion on the best way to do it. Now, there's always the classic way of following release order, starting with A New Hope, going through Return of the Jedi, jumping back to the prequels, then going to the current trilogy, things like that. There's also like the different cuts where you can interlace them with, I think it's called like the machete cut or something like that, where you like interlace old with new. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it. But my thought process is that there's actually 3 real ways you can do it, but the 2 that I'm going to discuss in this video are my most recommended, especially if you want to be introducing someone, whether it be a significant other or even maybe a kid, into Star Wars today. So the first one that I'm going to recommend is going to be just sort of the classic version, doing that original release run, starting with A New Hope, going to Empire, then Return of the Jedi, then jumping back to the prequels, Phantom, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, jumping to the present, which is going to be, Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. Now, the reason I recommend that version is just that's the way that I experienced it. I think a lot of us fans experience Star Wars. A New Hope and Empire and the originals was how we got introduced to it. The prequels have their faults, plenty of them. The new ones are kind of, not necessarily controversial, but they're very divisive amongst fans. But it's just the way that we experience Star Wars. So that would be one way I would recommend to watching it. I think the way that to do that version the best would be is if you're introducing a kid to Star Wars, a modern kid to Star Wars. You want to start with where Star Wars started from and then lead up to now. Follow that timeline. That's what I would recommend for kids. Now for adults, if you want to introduce your significant other, if you want to introduce your parents, if you want to introduce a teenager or somebody who's older, these next 2 methods would be my more recommended versions on how to do so. Now my second and third options on how to introduce someone to Star Wars are very much related. It just depends on where you want to start them off from. Now the first one, or rather the second option I guess, would be starting with Rogue One, and the third option would be starting with The Force Awakens. One of the main reasons why I recommend starting with either of those 2 movies is going to be, number one, that the fact that they're from modern times. They're going to be using modern technology, modern cameras. They're going to be using a lot of things that people are looking for visually today. If you show someone, an adult, a movie from 1977 today, most likely they're not going to be nearly as invested, nearly as interested in what's happening on screen than if they're watching something that looks and fits with the modern day. So putting something more recent as their starting point, launching off point, into this almost 40 plus, I think it's 42 as of this year, 2019, right around over 40 years franchise, that's the best way to introduce them. They don't care about where it started from. Some people might, but they're more interested in how does this relate to me today? And both Rogue One and The Force Awakens give them that opportunity, not only with the camera work, the technology, all of that stuff, but with some other things that I'm about to discuss. One of the biggest reasons why you should start with Rogue One or The Force Awakens, other than that, is going to be because they have a female protagonist. something that is severely lacking in the, or well, not just the, but any of the prior films. Any of those 6 films that you introduce them with, the originals or the prequels, are mainly male. They're mainly having, if there is a female protagonist or a female character, most of the time they're just sort of in the background or used as sort of like more of a sexual type of object, as what happened with Leia in when she was at Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi. So I mean, there's a little bit of an interesting dynamic there. Was it Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi? It was Return of the Jedi. Cool. I remember my Star Wars. So a lot of the female characters are played for just background or sexual objects. They just don't have a lot to do. Yes, Princess Leia does have an objective in A New Hope, but then after that, it's just sort of played to the background that she just has to get Obi-Wan Kenobi's help. They have to go and save her. She ends up being that damsel in distress character. With Rogue One and Force Awakens, you actually have a, number one, front and center female protagonist. They are the main figurehead on both the cover art and posters of these movies, as well as they're the main story. So they actually have a background to them, while Rey not so much that we know of so far, the recording of this video, but she is that figurehead character. She's strong, she's able to kick ass, she's able to use a lightsaber, she's able to do everything the boys do throughout the entire franchise that no other character has really done. And then there's Rogue One, where we have our main character who doesn't really have a lot in terms of Star Wars things to do, like lightsabers, stuff like that, but she is a figurehead in that she's influencing change. She's doing a lot of things proactively to save the galaxy. She has a connection and a backstory with her father that leads up to some other things, which is just a great launching off point in a character that's a lot more easily relatable to, again, introducing to a significant other or anyone like that, because they're not going to care about a farm boy in 1977 just going off into the galaxy because his family got killed and there's a bunch of other storylines happening that obviously they're just not interested in it. They're going to be wanting to see something modern with modern approaches and modern characters that they can relate to. And those are going to be characters that are going to be great jumping off points with Rey and with Rogue One, Force Awakens and Rogue One, having those main female protagonists. And then there's the significance of both of these movies and how they play into the overall dynamic of the Star Wars franchise. So the reason why I recommend Rogue One is because it doesn't have the entire weight of the entire franchise on its back. It's very much a contained story. It does have all the Star Wars things you want in it. It has lightsabers towards the end. It has, the stormtroopers. It has the actual space battles. It has ships. It has the terminology. It has everything peppered throughout there. But it doesn't carry the emotional weight of you have to know who these characters are, what's happening in the storyline in order to understand or grasp any of it. Plus, you have the added benefit with Rogue One being able to introduce someone to the franchise through that method, as they don't have that emotional weight. So you can start them with Rogue One. If they like that and want to know the storyline continued further, you can easily jump into A New Hope because it piggybacks right off of it. In fact, A New Hope is more or less a sequel. Rogue One is the story of obtaining the Death Star plans, figuring out what that flaw is, and then the way it ends is them passing off those plans, which then immediately segues into A New Hope, where they get those plans, are going to have to now execute and destroy the Death Star. So it's a perfect 1-2 punch in order to get someone introduced. You can start with something modern, be able to have that storyline develop, pass it right on to what's happening in the originals. It's going to kind of feel like a time warp situation where you're going to go back in time, obviously with a lot of the technology and things like that, but it feels like it's very easy to transition to. And then they start peppering the story about Luke, Leia, Han, and then you can just build into the franchise from there. It's a perfect segue, and it works every single time. I've had several people actually try that method, and it has surprisingly worked because they have the storyline. It's a through storyline. It's not something you're introduced to, something completely from way back in the past, completely other characters you have to go back to with the prequels, then have to come into the future, jump over, leapfrog that original trilogy to come to the modern day with The Force Awakens and the current trilogy. So it is kind of a tried and true. It's not going to work every time, but it's a great way to introduce someone to the franchise. And then there's the Force Awakens model. It's very similar to the Rogue One model, but it's going to be not as much weight to it, or not weight, but there's a lot more baggage in terms of the Force Awakens than there is with the Rogue One model. So the Force Awakens model is going to be for someone who does want to be introduced to Star Wars, is going to have that female protagonist, going to have that modern cinema experience, visuals, everything like that, technology. But you're going to have some salt and pepper of the old stuff in throughout the movie. So essentially the way that this is the way that I'm recommending this version is that introduce them to The Force Awakens. They're going to be watching the movie. They're going to have brand new characters that do not matter or appear in any of the prior movies. Rogue One included, prequels included, original trilogy included. So these are brand new characters with Finn, Poe, and Rey. Those are our main ones. They have their storyline. Now, peppered throughout, they're going to be talking about Luke. They're going to be having conversations and interacting with Han and Leia. Maybe confusing, yes, but that's going to lay the groundwork for who are these characters. Let me go back and discover their storyline. So talking about, for instance, Han. So when Rey and Finn first encounter Han, he talks with them about Luke and like getting the map to Luke. You're going to have the person sitting next to you go, who's Luke? Who is this guy? All these other questions that are coming up. That's going to lay the groundwork for the more curious-minded people to find out who are these characters and what is their impact. Why do I care about them now? So they now have to go back to, again, starting with probably A New Hope, travel that original trilogy. They don't have to do prequel work. But at least it gives them the opportunity to be curious, to want to know more. It's going to be laying the groundwork for some of the things to go back to, which actually laid the groundwork for what they're watching now. Confusing? Probably. But it's going to be able to, again, it's mainly for those more curious-minded. This one was actually the model that I call it a model. It's not something I developed. But this method was the one that actually my wife got introduced to Star Wars with. Because, again, female protagonist. It had the modern look, modern technology, modern cinema experience. And then she asked the question, who are some of these characters? She had seen Star Wars previously, but obviously didn't care as a kid. Now that she has, who is Luke or what was his thing again? Yes, you can explain it, but then the groundwork is really in the movies, so you can refer back to it. Plus, you get to watch the movies again. So that's a plus for you if you're the fan watching this, wondering how do I get my significant other introduced. You're going to get to watch Star Wars again. You're going to be able to answer all the questions, but you don't have to answer those questions right now. They'll be curious enough to want to know that information. You'll go back and watch it. A+ for you for being able to get them to watch it. And then, you can answer all those questions, but a lot of it happens in the movie, so you don't have to do it all yourself and feel like you have to explain the 40 years of franchise that just happened, referencing back and forth. Now again, as I said, this is not the perfect way to do any of this stuff. You can do it however you want. Everyone's different. Maybe you'll get somebody who wants to watch the original movies from start to finish. Maybe you'll get that person that wants to see the prequels first and follow 1, 2, 3, jump to the originals, 4, 5, 6, jump to modern time, 6, 7, 8, or 7, 8, 9, sorry. Maybe you have that person. I don't know. There's 1,000 different combinations and ways to do this. This is just purely a suggestion on how to get someone into Star Wars today in modern times, as it is kind of being a little bit more difficult with all the variations of ways you can watch Star Wars. This is just probably the best way, in my opinion, that could work for those members. Again, the classic way I think is more for kids, as they're just learning about the franchise. It's a great way to lay groundwork and learn more. For the older people, significant others, adults, I recommend these other two methods that I've recommended, Rogue One and Force Awakens. A lot of information here, I'm sure. But if you are a Star Wars fan, you probably know most of what I'm talking about. If you have been able to sit through the entire video, first of all, I appreciate it. Second, make sure you let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section down below. Do you think that these methods could work? Have you tried them out? Are you going to try them out? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section down below. Even if there's another method you think that might work that I didn't discuss, write it down there. I'd love to read it. But really, other than that, that's all my thoughts on the Star Wars and how to get someone introduced today. Other than that, thank you guys. Make sure you like this video, share it as well. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel. I have a ton of new videos coming out now, holiday videos, talking about movie reviews, talking about trailer reviews, all sorts of good stuff. So make sure you're subscribed to that. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.